First of all, I'd like to welcome Julie Alley. Let me go ahead and change my camera a little bit. There we go.
All right.
Yep, hold on. Adjust. I'm going to have to figure that out. Okay. Take a speaker view. And here we go. Julie is our Veteran Service Liaison, and I'm going to let her go ahead and give her 8 It Plus the Promise, since we always ask our volunteers to do that as well and our team members, because she has an extensive career working with veterans and also in social work. So go ahead and take it away, Julie.
All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm very glad to be here with you this morning. As Lori said, I'm Julie Alley. I am a social worker, and I am the Veterans Service Liaison for Hospice of Cincinnati. I have been a social worker with Hospice for 34 years. I've pretty much worked in every area. Some of you might be familiar with me from when I was the social worker for 15 years on our West Inpatient Care Center. It was in December of 2019 that I transitioned into the role of Veteran Service Liaison, and it was at that time they determined that there was a need to create a role to focus specifically on our veteran population. So I am currently doing that, learning a lot. It's been pretty exciting building this program. So we're going to spend the next hour or so talking about veteran care at end of life. And my promise to you is that I will do everything I can to be a support or a resource to you as you work with your veterans. So thank you for being here. All right, as this training says, we are focusing on caring for veterans at end of life. And when we look at the objectives for this training, there are 3 that we're trying to achieve. The first is to describe why it's important to improve our understanding and knowledge of veterans' needs at end of life. The second is to talk about unique issues that veterans may face related to their military service. And then finally, how can we best meet the needs of our veterans and their families based on those needs that they have? Why is it important to have knowledge and understanding of veterans' needs? 1 out of every 4 dying Americans is a veteran. Those are national statistics, and Hospice of Cincinnati's own statistics hold true to this. We're about 24% of our population this past year shows that those are veterans that we're caring for. So that's a pretty significant portion of our patient population. The vast majority of veterans are not receiving care in the VA system at end of life. More than 1,800 veterans die each day, and so about 96% of those veterans are being cared for in the community. So the VA is really relying on community hospices to provide that care, and they're committed to doing that. A while back, the Veterans Administration, in collaboration with the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization, decided to develop a program called We Honor Veterans, which hopefully all of you are familiar with. It's a program where hospices are able to partner with them. It's based on 5-star levels, with each star level showing increased organizational capacity to care for veterans. And Hospice of Cincinnati, we're proud to say, recently became star level 4.
Yay!
Absolutely. We're very proud of that. And then finally, veterans often have needs that are unique from the general population at end of life, needs that have been influenced by their military experience. And in understanding the veteran's experience, we're better able to serve and honor the veteran in the most meaningful way. And we believe that this is achieved through respectful inquiry, compassionate listening, and grateful acknowledgement. Now let's take a look at some of those needs that are unique at end of life. When we're looking at how needs are influenced by military, we look at it from 3 different perspectives. You know, how they are influenced just by virtue of the military culture that veterans have experienced with their service, how they are influenced by the culture of the time period or the war that they may have served in, and then also how they are influenced by very individual experiences. Now, it's very important before we explore this to note that not every veteran will have unique needs at end of life, and we want to be careful not to make assumptions just based on the title veteran. Now, how are these needs influenced by military culture? Many influences can shape a veteran's ideals and beliefs and demeanor. And these are some of the cultural norms that are characteristic of military service. There's a commitment to comrades, to the unit, and to the nation. And duty and loyalty are vital to the success of a mission. Honor is important, and this helps us understand why rituals and symbolism can be so meaningful to a veteran. One of the reasons we do our pinning ceremonies. Understanding these cultural norms and ideals can help us in our approach to supporting a veteran. We had an interesting situation with a veteran patient in home care who was nearing the end of life. He had some dementia. He was really pretty confused, slept the majority of the time, probably 20 out of 24 hours a day. Most of his sleeping occurred through the day. At night, he would have times when he would wake up and become very restless and agitated, but wasn't really able to communicate. This became a real challenge to his elderly wife, who was trying to manage his care at home. The clinical care team tried different medications that weren't successful. There were other medications that the wife didn't really want us to give him. And ultimately, what the family found to be the most helpful was that when he would wake up in the middle of the night with these periods of agitation, she would call up her son on the phone and put the phone up to his ear. And the son would say to his father, I am on duty now. I have checked the perimeter. Everything is secure. It's your mission right now to get some rest. And that seemed to calm him. It was one of the most useful things. And so they understood how significant. He was at a point in his life where he was so confused, but that military experience was still impacting him after all these years. He was close to 100 years old. Now, another military cultural norm that we want to talk about is the promotion of Stoicism. The military training that men and women in the armed forces receive revolves around a central idea that emotions are a weakness that can compromise the safety of the unit and the success of the mission. Soldiers are taught to suppress any emotions that show fear. We've all heard some of these statements. Big boys don't cry, no pain, no gain, few good men, once a Marine, always a Marine. Veterans who have had to practice this military cultural norm in a time of war may find it fitting to practice this same technique when facing death at end of life. So you can see how these things are critical for the success of the mission while they are in service, but sometimes these can become counterproductive at end of life, particularly when life review and processing of emotions becomes an important task for someone. That's a pretty characteristic thing that we see at end of life for anyone. I observed an interesting interaction one time between a civilian and a veteran patient who served in the Marines. And the civilian said to the patient, "I understand you were a Marine." And the patient corrected him and said, "I am a Marine." Absolutely. So, you know, it's so important for us to acknowledge this and to honor that. It's a huge part of their identity, but it's also important for us to understand how that impacts somebody late in life. Now, when we talk about how these needs are influenced by the culture or the time period that the person served in, you know, this is a pretty profound thing. It's a pretty unifying thing for men and women who have served in a certain time period, a pretty cohesive thing for them with other individuals who have served during that time period, because their experiences were very different. You can see with World War II. World War II was enthusiastically supported by Americans. You know, there were ticker tape parades, you know, there were victory gardens. Everybody wanted to be a part somehow. There was no media coverage at that time, and that kind of enhanced unity with Americans. There were two very important factors occurring. You know, the soldiers were fighting for their comrades, and they were fighting for the cause. And there were individuals as young as 14 who signed up at that time. But even the Red Cross would take pictures of those victory gardens and send them to the soldiers to show them how supported they were by the Americans. Made a huge difference. They came home as heroes. Korea. The Korean conflict was a whole different story. It was never officially declared a war, so you can even see just by the term Korean conflict, or it might have been referred to as a police action. It was known as the Forgotten War, and veterans' trauma was minimized and neglected, and their service was dismissed, kind of generally speaking. Vietnam was another whole different experience for the soldiers of that area. Soldiers were shamed and dishonored. There were a lot of anti-war protests, a lot of political division. Soldiers were encouraged to change into civilian clothing as soon as they got back into the States, and to avoid talking about their service. You know, as a country, we didn't want to hear those stories. So a lot of those stories, you know, got locked up inside. You know, there was kind of a sense that, you know, that we lost the war, that there was a sense on the part of the soldiers, all that we did, all that we sacrificed was for nothing. So, you know, this can complicate things at end of life for some of these veterans. There was also a kind of a whole new set of traumas that a lot of these soldiers were experiencing. And in response to that, now there is a lot of research being done on trauma-informed care for this population in particular. Then we get to the Gulf War in Iraq and Afghanistan. Again, with the Gulf War, they were greeted home, again, as heroes, but they had their own separate issues, concerns about toxic agents. There's a lot of issues with neurologic diseases. With Iraq and Afghanistan, we saw longer and multiple deployments and a lot of environmental and traumatic injuries, particularly like a lot of traumatic brain injuries. So the magnitude and time spent in a specific war is a major factor in determining needs of veterans. It's also important to note that veterans who served in peacetime were still trained the same as those who served during conflict. There was still a sense that we own you, we can send you anywhere. Then we look at veterans' needs that have been shaped by individual experiences. Again, talking about combat or non-combat experience. However, assumptions of combat veterans having more extensive unique needs while non-combat veterans have little to no needs can be unrealistic. The paranoia and stress placed on non-combat veterans could be an initial onset for specific needs that the veteran now requires. So you're always looking at the individual experiences that particular soldier has had. More than likely, prisoners of war may have experienced higher levels of trauma from their war experiences, which could increase unique needs of that specific veteran. Those veterans who had or struggle with post-traumatic stress disorder may require a more extensive level of support in relation to their needs. And depending on the war or the conflict that the veteran took part in, the specific branch and rank may have suffered more casualties during the war, which also can be an indicator of increased special needs. While enlisted veterans might have specific needs, drafted veterans might be bitter about their forced military service. And we've seen this with some of our patients. This variable could require increased needs from drafted veterans, but it could also make the task of supporting that veteran slightly more difficult. We've had a number of veterans, particularly from the Vietnam War era, who have actually declined pinning ceremonies. They either don't feel worthy of that honor, or they have a lot of kind of bad feelings about how they were treated or their experience in general. So that's something that we just respect their choice. How can we best meet the needs of our veterans? Having a veteran-to-veteran volunteer program has been found to be a very powerful component of achieving the most peaceful and meaningful end-of-life experience for our hospice patients. It's been known to be providing care through best practices.
I have a question on Zoom, if we can. What is a pinning ceremony?
All right, a pinning ceremony is when we honor that veteran's service with a certificate of gratitude and a little flag pin. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. I'll show a picture of the pin that we give them.
Thank you.
Okay. Veterans can provide a comfort and camaraderie because of shared interests and experiences. Veterans share a common language, a code of conduct and honor that are part of their military culture. These common experiences can foster trust and allow a veteran patient to share things he or she might not otherwise share. The culture of stoicism and societal reactions can discourage veterans from sharing their stories and experiences, but trained volunteers can create a safe environment for this. Sharing can actually support life review and healing, which is common at end of life. And the companionship of the veteran patient can provide needed respite and a sense of comfort to the family or the caregiver who's providing care to that patient. Now, there are considerations for veteran volunteers. It's important to examine how one's military training and experience influences one's thoughts and feelings about death and dying. How comfortable is the volunteer with tears? A lot of times, tears can actually be the story. Words are not always necessary. So it's a matter of presence and allowing that to occur. It's important to explore whether there's anything that might still be troubling from one's own dangerous duty assignments, because sometimes troublesome symptoms can resurface for the volunteer. It's important to examine one's own relationship with Stoicism. so as not to inadvertently promote that or reinforce that for the patient. Now, it's important to remember that all veterans are different and won't feel the same. And some veteran volunteers are actually more comfortable or prefer hospice patients who are not veterans themselves, and that's perfectly okay. One thing I really want to highlight is the benefit that veteran volunteers can experience by providing services to hospice patients who are veterans. We have learned this over and over again. We had one gentleman who started companionship visits with a veteran patient, and several weeks into it, he came back and said, the strange thing is, I'm sleeping for the first time in years, sleeping through the night. So he actually experienced kind of a physical benefit from it, but a lot of veterans have expressed a lot of emotional benefit just from providing those services. It's really a win-win for everybody. Now, we also want to note that non-veteran volunteers are sometimes very invested in providing care and support to our veteran patients. They may have no military history themselves, but maybe had family members who served. They may have worked closely in the military as a civilian, with the military as a civilian, or worked in an organization that served veterans. They may simply identify veterans as an underserved population and are committed to having no veteran die alone. And certainly they're willing to learn about veterans' needs, which includes all of you for being here, attending this. Considerations for non-veteran volunteers. It's important to note that every veteran's experience is different, as we talked about. One should avoid any kind of assumptions associated just with the term veteran. Non-veteran volunteers should also consult with a volunteer coordinator about a patient that might benefit from a veteran volunteer. And then it's very important to gain a basic understanding of how a patient's military service can impact them at end of life. Now, at this point, I want to talk a little bit about war trauma. Again, not every patient experienced combat, and not every patient who experienced combat experienced trauma. So we need to keep that in mind. However, there are a number of patients who have experienced trauma-related experiences, and we need to take a look at that. Deborah Grassman is someone who has worked with combat veterans for 30 years. And she identifies 3 potential responses to war trauma. The first is integration of trauma. The second is incomplete integration of trauma. That occurs when post-traumatic stress is prolonged for various reasons. And then apparent integration of trauma. A veteran who suppresses war trauma may not seem to struggle with post-traumatic stress and may manage very well throughout their lives, but at end of life, some of that might resurface, particularly as they might experience some confusion and less consciousness. So we want to take a look at these, and I'm going to talk primarily about them in terms of integrated and non-integrated. So with an integrated response to trauma, you might hear comments with a veteran patient that you're supporting, such as, I've faced death before, I'm not afraid now. Or, I've faced death before and survived. Every day since then has been a gift. The person can experience growth from those experiences, either growth in relating to others, personal inner strength growth, spiritual changes, a new appreciation of life, and maybe become open to new possibilities. This is referred to as post-traumatic growth. It's defined as the positive psychological result of those experiences. And it's really a growth that occurs because of new revelations, and the veteran may learn to cherish things that were once taken for granted. Many things can influence the ability to integrate traumatic experiences. The person might be naturally resilient. They might have very good family support or a social support network. They might have had a positive war outcome, and where the mission was successfully accomplished. This can be used to instill confidence in all daily activities. While many tend to remain silent about their war experiences, some feel more at ease after revealing their experiences. We had a gentleman in the program. This is when we were first starting to do our veteran care on a more intentional basis. And we had a chaplain who was wanting to work with this veteran and wanting to talk with the veteran about their earlier military experiences. And he went in, and it was a home care patient, and started, gently approaching him, discussing it. And the veteran started talking. And the wife was there, but she went out to make some coffee. When she came back in, she noticed that her husband was very emotional, and she just listened quietly as he finished talking, and she said to him, "You have never said that before. I have never heard this before." And the patient looked at the chaplain, and he expressed gratitude, and he said, "Sometimes you just have to say it once and for all." And this veteran patient became very peaceful after that, and over the next couple weeks of his life had a very peaceful ending. So what to do as a volunteer when you're working with someone who has integrated their trauma experiences? You just want to listen carefully, invite them to tell their stories, express appreciation for their service to our country, celebrate their accomplishments with them, and most importantly, affirm the wisdom they've gained and let it impact your life. I think this is the reason that as volunteers and as staff, we do the kind of work that we do, because it impacts our own lives. Now, when we move to incomplete or apparent integrated response to trauma, if you're with a veteran patient, you might hear something like, "I lost my soul in Vietnam," or "If I just such and such, he'd still be here today," or "Most of my brothers stayed over there." You might hear from a family member talking about their veteran patient. "My son's never been the same. I didn't know the person who came back to me." You might hear something from somebody who's dealing with a parent integrated response. "I don't want to talk about it. What good will it do anything?" Now, again, we always have to be careful. If somebody doesn't want to talk about it, it could mean that all their energy is dealing with something else, some symptom they're having, or they're just not having a good day. So we don't want to make assumptions, but we just want to be alert to those kind of comments and listen further. So when traumatic memories are not integrated, sometimes they can result in chemical dependency issues, post-traumatic stress disorders, estranged relationships. We've had we've had several veterans right now that I know of who have struggled with like homelessness issues and alcohol abuse. And when we're working with them on trying to understand their support system, there really is little to no support system at all. You know, they've had such challenges in their relationships with family members that they're pretty much estranged. So it becomes a challenge to try to address these multifaceted needs. And also, you know, with veteran patients where these issues are more prevalent, the clinical care team will provide more intensive intervention. So it may be that we never place a volunteer into that situation, but there are times when we might feel that it is an important source of support to the veteran. But we would always communicate with you about any concerns that we have and make sure that it's an appropriate situation for you to be in. You know, with a parent integrated response, you know, you might see more like somebody staying on guard that kind of keep the mask on all the time. You know, it's a matter of just, you know, providing that supportive presence and listening to them. Okay, what to do as a volunteer. Always remember that the behavior that you might be seeing may be related to the trauma. You know, you might walk into a patient's room at one of the inpatient units and the patient is very abrupt with you, irritated. You know that it could be from any number of factors. This could be one. You always want to provide a calm atmosphere, to not make sudden movements or touch somebody unexpectedly. And it's always best to call the person's name first and ask permission. And that's really a good rule of thumb with any of our patients. But, you know, you want to proceed gently into a conversation, and sitting quietly and patiently is sometimes the best thing that you can do. It often invites sharing. If somebody's trying to tell you about something they are feeling ashamed or guilty about, just listen. You know, try to avoid any well-intentioned platitudes like, you were just following orders, or that was a long time ago, you don't need to worry about that now, or you were just doing the best with what you could. Even though these things have truth to them, the message that may be coming across is that we don't really want to hear your story. So the best thing to do is just to listen and be present. And, you know, this is a gift that you as a companion volunteer have that a lot of times the members of the clinical care team don't have, and that's the gift of time. It's very powerful. You know, in terms of caring for any veteran, you know, there are culturally sensitive questions to ask, and this just talks about some of them. You know, where have you been stationed? Who'd you work with? What was your role? What you're doing is gently inviting the person to talk about their military experience, and that might lead to revealing deeper things for them that they may need to express. Whatever they share, you know, you can ask them the question, how did that impact you? I think if you have over time developed a trust and a rapport with a veteran patient that seems pretty comfortable communicating with you, I think that it would be okay to ask if there's anything that's troubling them about their military service. But you need to be cautious about that and be prepared for what might come from that. And again, just listen and be supportive. And you always want to express any concerns that you have about a veteran patient that you're dealing with to your volunteer coordinator. If there are concerns that you need to discuss with members of the clinical care team, I'm sure the volunteer coordinator could facilitate that. And again, you know, caring for any veteran as a volunteer, you're offering one of the most valuable things you have, and that is companionship. Keep the focus on the veteran patient, not on yourself. Remember, the veteran's experience is different from your own. Always ask permission. And essentially, that's opening the door, but you're never pushing. We're respecting the veteran's desire to talk or to not talk about it. And then to honor their service. And you can honor their service just with, you know, grateful acknowledgement, thanking them for their service. Or you can honor their service by participating in any number of honoring activities that we are doing with our veterans program, which I am going to talk about now. Does anybody have any questions about any of that up to this point in time?
Julie,
Mm-hmm.
Do some of the patients want to talk more about what the veteran coordinator, or as a veteran visitor, do they want to hear more about your career than they want to talk about theirs?
Some might, yes. Yes. I think the best rule of thumb is always to take the patient's lead. But yes, for some, I think that's important, and that kind of helps build that camaraderie. So if they're interested, you know, feel free to share if you're comfortable doing that. But I think if you can, you know, at any point, you know, focus back on them, you know, that would be good. Yes.
My experience, having done this at the VA and also at several hospitals, people want to talk about themselves. They don't really care about you. And I'm there for the patient. The patient is the most important person in the room.
How many of you have ever visited with a veteran? Show a sign of hands. Okay, good. How many of you felt like you were able to navigate those conversations pretty well at the time? Good, good. I know we have natural emotional intelligence as companion volunteers. And so I think what Julie's giving us is just a little bit more to add to our knowledge of their experience. Mm-hmm. But it's all those same skills: the active listening, mm-hmm. the letting the patient take the lead, the opening the door but not pushing. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, we have veteran volunteers, but we also want all of our volunteers to be equally equipped to visit, right? So we're very grateful. And you can participate in the activities as well. So just know that it's, as a staff member, I've participated in penning ceremonies. I haven't even had anybody in my immediate family serve. But it's important for all of us to recognize and say thank you.
Absolutely. And with that, we'll talk about some of these. Okay, so one of the ways that we honor our veterans, both veterans who have died in service to their country on Memorial Day, and veterans, our own veterans, and veterans everywhere on Veterans Day, are with these flag displays. Mm-hmm. Some of you have taken part in those, and I am so grateful for that. Yeah. Yes. But this past year, both on Memorial Day and Veterans Day, we ran 5 rows of flags, using 5 rows to represent the 5 branches. At some point, I guess we'll have to add the Space Force, but I don't think we're going to have any patience for a while. But we ran them. There were 1,400 flags we ran. Yeah. I can't remember how many feet, but it was all along Reed-Hartman Highway, if any of you have seen that. And that's been well received by the community as well. I can't remember if any of you were there when we did that. We had one gentleman drive by. I mean, we get lots of beeps and honks. We had one gentleman drive by, actually drive down into the parking lot and walk up that hill to tell us that he served in the Gulf War and to share how meaningful this was to him. So we felt very good about that. We'll be setting up flags again this Memorial Day. I'm not sure if our configuration will be a little bit different, but we'll have Lori put out an email and a sign-up sheet.
And I'll call. You don't have to be a veteran to help.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we need, if you can poke the stick in the ground,
Yeah.
then we need you.
That's right. Yes, we have both veteran and non-veteran volunteers show up. Okay, this is the pinning ceremony that we were talking about earlier. And I don't have one of the certificates on me, but it's a very nice certificate. Generally, it's a branch certificate. It's got the branch logo on it, and it just expresses gratitude for their service to our nation. So, and then we give them this little flag pin. We try to do this with every veteran who enters our program. The challenge that we have is that we are having a lot of veterans coming in late to the program, so they come in and pass, sometimes before our team members can get out to do this. So we're hoping to get more involvement from volunteers, particularly with the Blue Ash inpatient unit, because they have such a high volume and turnover of patients there. So,
who does the pinning?
Generally, the pinning is done by the staff. With things having been primarily shut down this past year with COVID and not having access to your services, our staff will do it. And it can be a chaplain, a social worker. We feel like it's always ideal when it can be members of a team together. It lends more respect to the service. And so it's kind of, we have actually had some of our admission nurses, if they go out to a hospital to admit a patient and they see that the patient is very imminent, might not even make it to one of our units, they might try to do the honoring ceremony there, or might call for one of our on-call staff to come up and do it. And sometimes it's very short. A lot of our patients have a very low level of consciousness. So, we always believe that hearing is one of the last senses to go. So we believe that the person is hearing us. And sometimes it's so very meaningful to the family. We had a gentleman who died in our home care program. He had served in Vietnam, served 3 tours. And his family was his daughter in particular was pretty emotional about the reception that he got when he came home from his service, and that he was never really honored for his service. So we managed to get a good number of the team members to go out on a particular day, and they had family come in. They had even had a grandson and his new wife who served in the military come in from overseas just to see him in his final days, and we waited till they came into town so they could be part of this, and we honored them as well. But the really cool thing about that situation was that one of our nurses is a veteran, and he actually did the pinning, and when he gave the salute at the end, I think the whole family was moved to tears. It's very powerful. And that's why I feel kind of passionate about trying to get our veteran volunteers involved in those pinnings, because I think that as a military service person yourself, you understand in a way that the rest of us can't the significance of that, and it brings a respect and a sacredness to it. But certainly any of our volunteers who can be involved, if you're on one of the units and you understand they're going to do a pinning, please, feel free to be part of that, because I think anytime we can take a team approach, it's very meaningful to the family and to the patient. Yes.
Are you going to advise people who are interested that this is coming up and we can volunteer for it, or how are we aware of that
Yeah.
Something's coming.
So with COVID restrictions, we're just kind of rebuilding the program. And so we're having a meeting after the session today for the veteran volunteers because we want to really focus on getting that group to start first. And then I think, we're going to continue to grow it. 5 stars means more activity. We're at 4 now.
Yeah.
So I think you'll be finding a lot of opportunities that will be offered. And this is just kind of the kickoff for that, re-kickoff, I should say, of it.
Absolutely. And if you find that there's something in particular you'd like to be a part of, let Lori know, and she'll get you connected to me, and we'll get you set up.
I would like to just mention to the group that when I've had an opportunity to, I'm a veteran, and when I've had an opportunity to work with, either visit with a veteran in the hospital or at the VA, and it's very cathartic for me because I'm honoring the people that I served with that didn't come back.
That's a beautiful statement.
Do you want to restate that so
yes.
everybody can hear it?
Yes. When he is providing services or care to someone who is a veteran, he is honoring the veterans that he served with who never came back.
Yes, that's true.
It's a very profound way to honor them.
I carried that grief for 30 years. Some of the veterans in here will understand that. And so it's still that opportunity to just let it go.
Conversely, as a non-veteran who I spent 2 years working in hospice at the VA here in Cincinnati, it is the veterans, I'm not sure you guys would agree, but the veterans, and it was told to me by the psychiatrist at the VA, the veterans were more open to me than they were to the vets. And I'm not sure why. But it was, I was one of the only non-vets at the VA working with the hospice people. And I had nothing veteran-wise to serve or to discuss with the vets. I'd mostly just discuss family things. And if they opened up to me, I'd listen. But that's mostly what it's all about.
I agree with you because what you're doing is, what you did is you built a relationship with the person. They didn't know you, you didn't know them, so you asked about their family and where they grew up, and that's what people want to tell you. They're proud of themselves. They don't care about, not that they don't care about you.
For those in Zoom land, there's some discussion in the room about veterans opening up to non-veterans, and because they enjoy telling their story. So.
And I think what he's saying is that sometimes some veterans are more comfortable with a non-veteran volunteer.
And
So.
unfortunately, at the VA, half of the unit, the CLC, had no family members. So you were the only contact. So it was really important.
Talk to you about that. Yeah, and I'm working with the VA now.
Okay.
All right.
We've got about 10 minutes left.
Okay. I'd like to move on. A final escort is something that we have been working hard on this past year. And again, a number of volunteers have really assisted me in this, and I'm so grateful for that. They assisted by making calls to local funeral homes, asking them if they would partner with us on this initiative to do a flag draping for the final escort. We really feel like every veteran should be given this respect when they are removed from their place of death, whether that's the inpatient unit, their own home, or a long-term care facility. So we've had a little bit of delay in really getting that rolling because of all the issues with COVID. We focused primarily on our inpatient units. And the Blue Ash unit, my intent is to work on that again, hopefully with some veteran volunteers who might be interested in supporting that. so that we can get that up and moving. That one was delayed because we've taken COVID patients here, but our other units are all doing that. And actually, one of the social workers called me this week and said they had a veteran patient who helped liberate Auschwitz, and he was only 18 years old, and he came in and was actively dying. They managed to do a pinning ceremony, and I think that he died maybe within hours of his admission. So luckily, we've got a very committed staff over there on the West Unit, and they made it happen, and they did the final escort. Okay? And then veteran crafts or projects. Judy here has been involved. This might have been what Judy made. Yeah. We have a group that will do sewing projects. These are door hangers that we use on our inpatient units. I don't know if we use them in long-term care yet.
We haven't. We need to come up with a craft that is maybe more the volume. We can do the volume because we can only use that craft one time for each patient, so we can't reuse them.
Right.
So we're working on that, and we've got pillowcases. We're working on pillowcases. We actually have students who are sewing pillowcases.
Oh, wow!
Now. A Gapstone student she's got a goal of
Great.
500 pillowcases. Didn't even know how to sew. Took it on as her goal. So
wow.
We'll see. She's got the whole summer, and then we report back to us. So
that's.
Her mom's so grateful because she's finally learning to sew. But I think it's nice that they're interested in that.
That is awesome. Yeah, we've talked about different things like little lap quilts, but I think the pillowcases, we thought if we could give every one of our patients when they're admitted a pillowcase with patriotic fabric, that would be nice. And these are the door hangers that identify a veteran patient, and then the family can take that home with them.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was with another hospice organization, and the door hangers, family after the patient passed said they'd appreciate it if they could have someone say, can we have this go with Dad or whoever it is, and have it buried with him. So it's
wow.
They're very appreciative.
Wow. That says a lot. Yeah, it's meaningful to them. And then, of course, veteran events. This was our first flightless honor flight. This was done by Marcia Bowling and a group of supportive people at 2 different retirement communities for those veterans who aren't well enough to make the trip to Washington, D.C. And those virtual honor flights have been taken over by Honor Flight Tri-State, which, of course, everything's been kind of shut down this past year. But those are the kind of events that we might have, any kind of, Veterans Day events. I know volunteers help deliver forget-me-not bags and challenge coins to our veteran patients. We'll be having the Memorial Day services come up. We're doing one in the Blue Ash Courtyard on May 27th at like 1:30, and then one up in Hamilton the evening before. We're trying to get that set up. We're also, going to be doing some other kind of events throughout the year. So Lori will make you aware of those as those occur. And then, I just want to say thank you, volunteers.
The
yes.
event on the
7th?
Yeah, May 27th at 1:30 p.m. here at Blue Ash. We will have a memorial service.
From 1:30 to 2.
1:30 to 2.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then the one at Hamilton, we're looking at the evening before, like around 5 o'clock. We've got a staff member up there who has a Boy Scout troop, and they want to do a flag folding ceremony for it. So, yeah, nice way to get the younger group involved. But thank you all for everything that you do for our veteran patients, your care and support of them. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Anybody have any questions? I've got a couple online. Well, baking bears with patriotic fabrics. Yes, excellent. Thank you, Laura. We love having those bears. Just like the pillowcases, they're just a nice way for us to express our appreciation. So thank you for doing those. And it's also a nice way to get involved with your grandchildren. So appreciate that.
Absolutely. All right. Does anybody else have any comments, please?
Speaking of bears, at the other hospice I was with, it was tradition to take a bear into a patient, and brought the bear in. He was very agitated. Hold that, blah, blah, blah. I don't need a bear. I said, I'll just leave it here while I do something else. I'll come back. I came back. I said, I came to get the bear. He said, the heck you are.
Clever of you to know just to leave it with him. Absolutely. And I am always open to any input from any of you. I know some of our veteran volunteers have been so helpful to me as we build this program. You have the service experience, I don't. So please don't ever hesitate to reach out and make a comment or share something you think I should know. And together I think we'll build a wonderful program for Hospice of Cincinnati.
Julie, can you talk a little bit about the other services you provide with connecting them to benefits?
Yes, I am the primary liaison with the VA Hospice and Palliative Care Coordinator over at the Veterans Administration. So I work pretty closely with her, and what we try to do, anytime that you might have a patient that you think may want to explore benefits or services or may need that, feel free to communicate that. I guess, would they communicate that with you, Lori? And then Lori would communicate with our social worker to look into that. So I am a support person for our social work staff as they assist families in accessing benefits and resources. My goal is to put out some teaching materials, information that we can actually hand out to families. Paul has been assisting me with that piece. So, we want to make that accessible to veteran patients and families. But yeah, if you come across that, please communicate that to us.
Yeah. Well, we are happy to have your expertise, Julie. Everybody give Julie a round of applause.
Thank you.
Our veteran program has continued to grow under her leadership, and we just look forward to seeing it flourishing and being able to serve veterans in more and more ways. And we're very excited about our veteran volunteers coming and being a part of the team that helps to do that, as well as all of our volunteers. This is just a monthly continuing education class that we're going to start offering. At the end of this session, I'm going to send all those that participated in evaluation and also kind of a list of topics that we thought we might consider offering you. So please tell us what your interests would be. It helps us to make the education more valuable and meaningful to you and into your practice as serving patients. Next month, we're going to try to stick with the Friday mornings at 10, the second Fridays, so that we have a really regular schedule. Next month, it will be June 11th, and we will have one of our volunteers speak, Joan Schmitz from our North region. She has done a lot of work with what we call it legacy work, with helping patients to compile their memoirs and stories and collect them together to present them to their family as kind of a memorial project. And so she's going to talk a little bit about how companion volunteers, you can help any of your patients to do that, and what resources we have available to help organize them, put them into books for people. We also do arts. We can do hand tracings. We can do photography. We can make memory bears from people's clothing, as well as help them write letters, maybe to like their grandchildren for when they get married or graduate or different things. So that's all kind of under the headline of our legacy program, and that will be June the 11th at 10 a.m. Again, we will offer it the speakers in person here and remote viewing at our inpatient units as well as on Zoom and follow up with a video. So thank you. Thank you, Julie. Thank you to everyone in Zoom land. We are grateful for you. I hope you enjoyed and look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.